All right, friends. I thank you for starting to get into that and doing the icebreaker games. Another icebreaker that I'm a big fan of that I've used in the past with crew. We would do small group Bible study, and one that I really liked was a game called Two Truths and a Lie. You tell true statements that are true about yourself and one that is false, not necessarily in that order, and the group has to determine which one of those is not factual. That's another one. There's a lot of those out there. If you look up online, you can find long lists of interesting icebreakers. But that was one of my favorites. I would use stuff like, let's see. Let's see if you can guess. I have crashed the party of a town I had never been to. It was a festival, and I took pictures with the queen of the festival and her court. I collect throwing knives. And the third, I have once fallen out of a tree that was 12 feet high, landed on my feet like a cat. Okay, maybe not like a cat, but I landed on my feet. Which do you think is? Which do you think is the lie? You guys are right. I'm a terrible liar and a bad poker face. I don't collect throwing knives, but I have done those other two things. I will comment, falling out of a tree is the least fun of those. So don't do it. Today as I already clicked the button, but... Is that on? Yes, I already turned it on. Yeah, do you guys want to move a little bit closer? Because we're going to have, if we have some different discussion time, we actually have a microphone today, so we can pass it around. We realized last week we didn't catch. So if you can... You don't have to fill this one, but...
Now I'm going to nominate Don so he can see that just to make sure Seth stays within frame.
Oh, I'm pretty good. I know I can go from about here to about over here. So I think I probably drive Andy a little more crazy. He put an X up there in the front where he kind of wants us to stand. He'll see this later when he reviews the video. He put an X up there in the front where he's like, this is the center where the camera is centered on. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I just kind of wander back and forth when I preach. So I don't come down into the congregation and wander around. But
Can I just say you did a wonderful job today?
Well, thanks.
You did a great job. It was really wonderful, and even I appreciate your flexibility. Probably Jenny's comments were a little lengthier. It was just a wonderful service.
Yeah, it was fun. So I tell people I like preaching, which is good because I'm a preacher. So. But I appreciate that, and hopefully we'll be able to keep the gusto and steam going through this as we continue on. Here in the second week, our focus today is really on building connections. It's on invitation and follow-up. And that might seem like you're going to spend a whole week on that, but it's really important. Before we move into that, though, I want to go back to our why, of why we do this. Why do we start small groups? And it's an example actually from early Methodism. Two of the early founders of Methodism were John Wesley and George Whitefield. They're both great preachers and met each other at Oxford while they both studied there. And it was kind of after John Wesley's, what they call his evangelical awakening, which was when he realized that God loved him and had forgiven him. Not just generically, but God loved him, and that changed his life. George Whitefield had a similar experience. He invited John. He said, hey, let's go out. Let's preach, not just in the church, but let's go out everywhere. Kind of fitting with today's theme. They would go out and they would preach in open air places. They would go to coal mines, the coal pits, and they would preach to people. They would preach in foundries. John Wesley even preached from his father's own tombstone. He got him onto this thing of going out. And George Whitefield was a prolific preacher. I mean, he came to the United States, and he would go around, and he would preach, and he would preach, and he would preach, and he would preach, and thousands of people would come to hear him preach. Benjamin Franklin, who himself was a little more of a deist, he wasn't quite in the same place theologically as Whitefield, still came to hear him preach. And he told other people, when you go to hear Whitefield preach, go with empty pockets. Because if you don't start with empty pockets, by the time he is done, you will have given everything in your pockets to support his ministry. He said he was that persuasive in his preaching. It touched him that much. He also did this little experiment where he paced off how far Whitefield was preaching. He paced off to see how far he could hear him preach. And it was about 500 feet. And he calculated about 2 square feet per person. He figured he could preach to 30,000 people at one time. You have the estimates of like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people that he was preaching to as he went throughout the American countryside. He went up and down the coast, and at the time of the American Revolution, he was better known than anybody else in the United States. More people recognized his face than anyone. I mean, even like King George, who's on currency, people knew Whitefield's face better because of how prolific his ministry was. But when he got to the end of his days, he was mournful. He was mournful because he said he looked back at his followers and his words were, "They are but a string of sand." Because of this huge, prolific preaching ministry who reached people, but he never really organized them into groups and got them connected. And so for the majority of them, they might have had these amazing experiences. But a year down the road, 2 years down the road, they're right back to where they were before. They're not involved in church. They're not connected. Which contrasts John Wesley. John Wesley did preach to large crowds. They have examples in his journal where he talks about talking to 5,000, maybe 10,000 people at a time. But he spent a lot more of his time in connecting people into relationship, of making sure that once they decided to follow Jesus, they were there with somebody else following Jesus together. He organized them into different groups that he called classes, bands, and societies. So because the Methodist movement was not meant to be a new church per se, they really thought of the big circle as the Anglican Church in England. Anglican, I'm botching that, but a big circle. Within that, he would try to make a society, which would be kind of what we think of like a church worship service today. That was the big group where people came. But in order to come to the big group, you had to be a part of a class, which, as we talked about last week, was typically between 8 and 15 people. And that's where you would ask each other the questions of, how is it with your soul? How is God working in your life? How are you experiencing freedom? What are you struggling with? How can we encourage you? How can we help you? And then they would break it down even smaller into bands within that. And those were 2 or 3 people who were really, they knew what was going on in each other's lives. They asked questions that got in each other's faces. But because of that, instead of having just these great crowds come, or even having large organizations, what they ended up having was a movement. It was an exponentially growing movement that grew extremely rapidly and reached people all around the world. It went from England, hopped across the ocean into the Americas, where they grew extremely rapidly, and it tailed off but has continued around the world. There are places in America is not growing like mad today. We are on the decline as a denomination year after year after year. But if you look to Africa, if you look to Asia, if you look to Eurasia, like Russia, the Philippines, they are adding a tremendous number of people who were not in church before coming in. It's a movement, started a movement. That is my dream of what I want to see really come from the ministry that I do. And I don't say that arrogantly, but I just want to give ministry that will keep going. And I think connecting people in small groups is one of the ways that we do that as a church, is connecting people together so they can walk with Jesus together. Not be like Whitefield's followers who maybe experience an amazing time where they know how much God loves them, but they can continue to have those little encouraging experiences when things get tough that'll keep them on the track, keep walking with Jesus through their whole lives, and help other people follow Jesus as well. That is why we do what we do. As we move into the thinking about invitation, though, specifically, of that role in this, the question I have for the group is, do you have a social hobby, as in one that you do with other people? And if so, how did you get involved in it? Would anybody like to share? We all have individual hobbies or no hobbies? We don't have time for hobbies. What do we?
So I've got an individual hobby, photography, that I've recently joined a photography club, and it has become a social activity.
Oh, cool.
Go out and do things with a group of people. So
Yep, photography, yeah.
An individual thing kind of converted into a group thing that I enjoy.
Awesome, awesome. That's a fun one.
I read a ton, and I'm not currently in one, but I've done book clubs
Mhm.
before. You know, just being with other people who enjoy reading and
Mm-hmm.
and discussing. So it's been social previously, just not right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So reading book clubs. I'm just recounting, so if I don't hand you a microphone, they can hear it on the thing. We can hear it later when we come back. Because otherwise they're going to be like, what is going on? So Sharon, you've got one?
So it isn't really a hobby. I'm like in Indie Crew, which is the professional group for women in
Mhm.
commercial real estate.
Mhm.
We do networking activities. We do
Yeah.
professional work, training, but it has luncheons and we catch up on all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Great. Christine?
The Writing with Spirit group here.
Yeah.
Would count
Writing with
as a
Spirit.
social hobby for me, and also very much a small group.
Awesome.
This will sound strange, my social hobby is working. And that's, as you get older and you've retired and you want to have interface with people, and how I got involved is because I am older, and that's a way to stay connected.
That's awesome. So continuing to work allows you to continue to be around
I
different
work
people and
dangerous.
yeah.
She was the Hallmark lady. That's right.
The Hallmark.
Everyone knew her as the Hallmark lady in town.
Yeah. So before I kind of go into the explanation of why I've asked this question, this is a great opportunity to pause and think back. If you're here for the first session last week, we talked about there are different kinds of questions that we can ask in a small group that stimulate conversation, that keep it going. That there are closed questions, which have a limited number of answers, and then there are open questions. So here we've paired a closed question. Do you have a social hobby? This is a yes or no question. If we left it on its own, that's not a very good question. But you can pair it with, if so, how did you get involved? Right? That makes it open. Then people talk about what it is they're doing. It's an invitation to move into that. Then I said that I ask that. Oh, do you have a question, Ramona?
I don't think of mine as a hobby.
Yeah.
I guess that's what
Mhm.
went through me. But the thing that I enjoy the most is taking people older than myself or whatever, that no longer drive, need to go to doctor's appointments, need a visitor, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that since I retired and even when we lived in another state.
Yeah, so connecting with people, continuing to engage with them. You've actually done the social part, just without the hobby part. So yeah, we tend to think of hobbies as like, how can I spend my time doing, something just to spend my time, or creative, different things like that. But yeah, you're just, pulling it together. So I ask that though, because most of the time, if we talk about how did you then get involved in that first, that follow-up question, I think has some interesting answers. Don, how did you first get involved in photography?
I think as an individual thing, I think I've always liked interesting images or images that capture my attention.
Mhm.
I've wanted to be able to produce something similar.
Mhm.
So eventually got myself a decent camera, so-so camera,
Yeah.
and worked up from there. And learned about it kind of individually for a while.
Mhm.
And I guess it kind of drew me in.
Cool. So the individual interest in seeing other people do that, then, wanting to be able to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
so.
I'm trying to remember others.
I
Heather,
was
you want to?
invited.
Yeah. So you were invited to a
Yeah,
reading group?
Yeah, it was a book club that kind of broke off from a mom's group that I was a part of, and some were kind of talking about books we were reading, and she said, "Why don't we start a book club? Would you join?" And so that's how I got involved with that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, invitation from Mom Sharon, you.
Yeah, mine illustrates the same thing too. I joined and didn't really connect with Indie Crew, and then and I was out for a couple of years, and one of the women in the group looked me in the eye and said, "Sharon, you really should be in this group. Why are you not in this group?" And I thought, I really respect her, and she thinks I should be here, so I signed back up, and then I've been part of it ever since.
So for yours, it's not necessarily the invitation, but it's the reconnection that's happened, being re-invited to come back and be connected to it again. So that's cool, yeah.
And she really challenged me that I should be there.
So my point is, I think we've kind of made it for the most part, but when we have a hobby, something that we care about, it's often connected to the fact that somebody has invited us to be a part of it. It's through that social connection that we get involved in, even if it's an individual thing. You know, somebody might collect stamps. Their father collected stamps, and that got them interested in it, so they collect stamps. And maybe they don't go to a stamp collecting convention or anything, or group, but they're doing something individual because somebody first invited them to be a part of it. It's an interesting thing, they say, that baseball has declined in America today because baseball is a game that fathers teach their sons. And when fatherhood is kind of broken in America, with a lot of absentee fathers, you don't pass on baseball. It's one of those social things that comes by the father inviting his son to play with him, the father inviting his son to come to games, different things like that. That's how it's happened. And it was weird because that's how I fell in love with baseball. I was talking to one of my friends, and he goes, we had not had this conversation. He goes, "Yeah, my dad really wasn't into baseball, so I don't really have any interest in the sport whatsoever." But it's the invitation that has that power and that influence in it. We assume that with most everything that we do in the world, but I don't think we always assume that with church. With church, we can kind of assume that people will just get involved with, they'll hear about it, they'll know about it, they'll hear some advertising. But I guess brings it to another question. How did you first get involved with a church, whether it's coming to worship or small group, whatever? How did you first get involved in church? I shared in the sermon today, I was brought by my parents, so.
Well, I grew up in a little town in Nebraska, and church was, everyone went to church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the social gathering for the community. I didn't know anything else.
Mm-hmm. So a similar story of parents bringing it, being a community. Yours, I mean, I like that part that you're emphasizing community, right? So community came and brought that. Christine?
So as a child, I went to church. I can't say I was involved in it, but how Don and I got involved here, we fairly new to Zionsville, maybe a year or so in. We knew we were looking for a church.
Mm-hmm.
And a wonderful woman by the name of Susie Aaron came by and registered us to vote and mentioned this church, and she invited us to this church.
Awesome.
And that was maybe 30 years ago plus.
So so Susie came and registered you to vote for the first time you'd met her?
Yeah, she came
And
to
she-
registering to vote.
Awesome. Invited you to come and be a part. And here you are. How many years did you say?
I'm thinking probably we're like 33, 34 years. I believe.
Awesome. 30 some years. That's awesome. When we think about it, I think most of our stories will involve somebody. Occasionally, it's somebody, I was hitting a hard time in my life, and I thought maybe church has what I'm looking for. And they see a sign and they show up. But more often than not, it's through a person. God uses people. He uses ordinary people like you and like me to do amazing things, right? To connect with people. It's sometimes I wonder, I'm like, why doesn't God do something like different to save the world? But this seems to be his plan. That he uses us, empowered by the Spirit, ordinary people, broken people who are being restored, reach other people, to connect with them, to invite them to be a part. When I was in Crew, I've mentioned this a couple times that I was in Crew, but the area that I was a part of was the Mid-Atlantic. That was what our campus was affiliated with, and they did a study across the Mid-Atlantic of 35 high-impact leaders that had not been Christians when they came into Crew, like they came to college. They came to faith through that ministry on their campus, and then they had become, involved and were now leading in it. And 33 of the 35 people recounted being invited by somebody else to something involved with the church, right? Being invited to a Bible study, being invited to the weekly worship meeting, being invited to just a social event. We would go and have a day where we'd hang out on the beach right before, I was fortunate because I lived in Erie, Pennsylvania. Most people wouldn't say that if you've been to, they call it dreary Erie, they call it. But the perfect time of year, so deceiving, right at the beginning of the semester, it's like at the end of summer, you could go to Presque Isle State Park, which is right on the lake. Beautiful sand beaches. We'd go play in beach volleyball. We'd play on the beach. We'd invite people to come and be a part of that. The rest of the year was all dreary and cold and snowy and rainy, but that was an opportunity for us to invite people to come and be a part. That was one of those things that would bring people to come and get involved. We had people who, that was the first contact that they had with us, was they were freshmen on campus, and their RA, who's a sophomore, says, "Hey, we're going down to the beach with Crew. Do you want to come?" And it wasn't even explicitly like, well, you have to be a Christian to come and be involved, and we're going to sing worship songs on the beach. No. We literally just went and then played ultimate frisbee and built sandcastles and goofed off on the beach. That's what we did. All of it was involved with invitation. And that's what we want, though. We want to invite people to be connected with Jesus, directly or indirectly. And so we invite people. We encourage them to come and be involved. It's what it's all about. If they're never invited, it's unlikely that they will come. With that, when we're thinking about the importance of invitation, I guess how does that compare with what you think of most people getting involved with church? We've each recounted that, for the most part, we came into church because of somebody else walking with us or inviting us. Is that what we normally think of? If not, then what do we think of?
Obviously, there's lots of people that grew up in the church, and so as adults, either continue to go or at some point think, I want to reconnect with what I had in my past, and then open a phone book and find what the local churches are.
Yeah.
As mobile as our society is, I think we need to put more emphasis on that invitation. And I think in myself, I don't always do that.
Yeah. Sharon?
I do real estate. I think, well, people drive by, they see the sign, they look it up
Yeah.
in the phone book, or they actually they Google it. Is what
Mhm.
I see.
Yep.
You Google and go, churches near me, this one looks like it's got a time I'll have to get up too early, I'll go to this one.
Yeah. They used to say that your worship service was like the front door of your church, that people would be looking for your sign, they'd be looking up the phone book, looking up to come and do that. What's interesting is they say now, if that is the front door, then the internet is really like the porch, because people will look up on Facebook, they'll look up on Google, they look at the reviews, they look at the pictures, they look at the video, those different things. And we've had people come to ZUMC who have been taking part in the live stream services. And they said, we've been watching this for about a month, but now we've decided we want to come and be a part.
Wow.
So, yeah, Sharon?
Can you describe the type of people that works successfully? Was it younger people?
It's been pretty broad, actually. We've had younger people say that, and we've also had middle-aged people. We've even had some people who you think, I wouldn't think you'd be quite as internet savvy. mature in age, who just don't typically flock to internet pieces of technology and so forth. So I think I botched that pretty poorly on trying to be kind about it. They were older people. Like my grandfather doesn't even know how to get his now I'm dating myself, VCR to stop blinking 12. The guy's not looking on, if he had moved, he wouldn't look online for a church. But
Given that you've only done that for less than 6 months, that's a really interesting piece.
yeah, yep. Started back November, December.
Yeah, right.
So
Those before
yeah.
Christmas,
As we're thinking about this, I had a leader in crew who he was over top of our area, and he supervised the different campuses, worked with leaders. And he would say that if you were to have a party and you decided that to get people at your party, you would print off all these flyers, right? You're going to print off all these flyers. You're going to put them up outside your friends' dorms. You're going to put them up outside their classrooms on their campus. You maybe even rent a billboard, near the campus and put up a big thing of what's going on with that. But you come to the night of the party and none of your friends are there. Would you be surprised? I wouldn't. Personally, I would. Of course, it'd be like if you asked them, well, you didn't invite me. If you have a party and you want people to show up, you invite them. The personal connection is what makes them. Invitation is the key. Now, I can confess that I have done ministry events and different things before where I've just been so busy with stuff that I'm like, you know what? We have advertised it. We have announced it. We have put it on bulletin boards. We have, put it on the internet. We have done this. People will show up. But if there hasn't been personal invitation, they don't show up. It happens. I'm discouraged because I'm thinking, man, people don't want to be a part of this. But the reality is I never asked them to be. I'm assuming they said no to something that I never asked them to give an answer on. We can't assume that somebody has said no to something if we didn't actually ask them, right?
About the people that are showing up here today.
Yeah.
Don't get a personal invitation.
I know it. Okay. I think so. I don't think any of you came by advertising, did you? I thought you meant, when you first said that, I thought you meant to worship here today, that the people who first came. Because it was interesting, last week I had somebody who came, they said, oh, I'm new here. I said, oh, that's awesome. They said, I know so-and-so. I used to work with him when we lived in another town, and so when they moved here, this became the place that they came to check out. So the question I have is, if we're just kind of slowing down, I'm talking way too much, but how would you feel if a friend had a party and left you out? Well, how would you describe that? Okay, wait, let me pause that. If you're an introvert who hates parties, let's replace this. If you had a friend who left you out of something that you love doing and they know you love doing, like let's say you like being just one-on-one with people and doing spelunking, that's cave exploring, and you found out they went to your favorite cave and didn't invite you, how would you feel? What words would you use to describe that? Disappointed? Yep, okay.
Overlooked.
Ooh, rejected.
Angry. Like, why didn't you think of me?
That's a dark list. I'm laughing at it because it's not funny. But conversely, how would you feel if how do you, like, if we're thinking about how do you feel when you're invited to those things? Maybe to put it a different way, what if they were doing that, and you weren't expecting that invitation, but they said, hey, I'm going to your favorite cave to go spelunking. Would you like to join me? Insert your favorite hobby here. How would you feel? Excited? Special? Happy? Somebody say happy? Or did I hear that in my mind?
Included.
Accepted? If you haven't already noticed, I mean, maybe you're doing this. It's kind of like, it's the opposite. The opposite of those things, right? Invitation takes people from this space, which they can feel like when we don't invite them, to that space. It makes people feel valued. It makes people feel included. It makes people feel wanted, that they matter. Like you have seen them. I think that's a really core thing, is that people want to be seen. They want to be known. You can feel really isolated. You can feel like you're alone. People want to know that they've been seen, that they matter. When we invite people, we are doing that. We're helping them know that they've been included.
I think if you didn't know them very well and they asked you, you can feel really honored that,
Mhm.
gosh, they noticed me.
Yeah, that's great. If somebody invites you to something, you feel honored to be a part of that. You feel, especially even, as we said, if you weren't expecting that, you feel special. Sharon?
But I'm going to the theory of small groups, but how we're running a lot of small groups now is we put an open invitation in the bulletin.
Yeah.
And it's self-selection. So it's not, you were special to me, I would love to have you be in my small group. Would you please come join me?
Yep.
Because I need you, if you're good at this. We're saying to complete strangers, pick something.
Yep.
With a complete stranger you do not know.
Yep.
You may not remember your name on a piece of paper for someone else.
Mhm.
And we're having strangers without an invitation piece at all.
That is an apt observation. It's actually proceeding where we are going with this. That is a part of this. Of our current model that we do for it is we put things in, maybe I'm not that far ahead. Maybe I can just jump to it. Probably have a little bit more, but I'll say it anyway. The way that we've done it in recent history has been we put it in the bulletin, we put advertisement, we might even put up boards in here and have a little ministry fair, and we ask people to self-select into it. But the thing is, even there might be people who are interested in being a part of a small group who are going to still not take part in that. They're not going to fill it out. They're not going to do it. What gets the people from going there to being a part is invitation. So that's a shift that we have to live into, and it's our expectation we want for our small group leaders, whether you have an existing group that's welcoming people or if you're starting a new group, to invite people. And we'll keep moving through this, but to invite them to be a part. When we're talking about invitation, pretty much everything in church right now, I can't remember if I'm on. Yeah. Everything in church, if you look at all the statistics, you find that 80% of people who get involved in something come because they were personally invited by somebody else. So the Alpha course, that's what they say for pretty much everything they do. Life Church is the church that Craig Groeschel is at. It's like the largest church in the U.S. They keep putting up all these campuses across the Midwest. They say for all of their small group leaders, they tell them, we're going to advertise this in church. We're going to let people know that it's happening. But it is your job to invite people to come. Right? Invitation is what's going to get them there. Advertisement lets people know about something, but invitation is what brings them into it. You know, people want to be informed. They want to know what's going on. But unless you invite them, they can feel left out. I'm looking at the wrong one. They can feel left out. They can feel overlooked. Like, well, nobody invited me to be a part of a group. When you invite them into those things, you have the opportunity to make them feel that way. And I don't say this like, well, this is like, we're emotionally manipulating people. This is how I want all of us to feel. This is how I want to feel. I want to feel excited. I want to feel special. I want to feel included and accepted. I want that for everybody. We have the opportunity to help people do that. When we're thinking about worship, just an example of invitation, Lifeway, which is an arm of the Southern Baptist Church, is run by Tom Rainer, and he does all sorts of studies on different church demographics and numbers that are going on. And the research that they've conducted has found that, again, 80% of people say, when polled, who are not part of a church, that they would come to a worship service and check it out if someone would invite them. Right? 80%. Yet, at the same time, when you poll Christians across the U.S. from multiple denominations and non-denominational, an average of about 2% of people actually invite. 2% of Christians can list having invited somebody to their church in the last year. So there's that discrepancy, right? People might be open to coming to something that we're doing as part of a church, but we don't invite them. We don't ask them to be a part of it. The question that I have is, where's my question? Oh, I didn't get it included. Yeah, I can skip over that one. The question, or when we come to it, making an ask, when we're actually trying to ask somebody to invite them, like that's, how do we do that? How do we go about it? We want to think about a few things. First, we want to be clear. People need to know the details of what we're asking them to be a part of. They need to know when it meets, where it meets, why it meets. Some basic pieces of that. Is there childcare? Will you share a meal? What are the basic expectations? Like, we have to let people know. We kind of want to think about an elevator pitch. Each one of us, if you have 30 seconds after worship to let somebody else know, or 30 seconds at the office, or 30 seconds when the census worker is, following up with you on something or registering you to vote, you have 30 seconds to let people know what you're doing, and you can invite them to. You want to be clear about that. The second is to be honest. By that I mean don't bait and switch. Sometimes church people are really great at asking somebody to do one thing, and then when you get into it, you find out, oh my gosh, this is way more than what I thought it was going to be. Right? Like, oh, it's so easy. You barely have to do anything. It's really late. We just try to make it as low as possible. And we want things to be easy for people to say yes to, but it's not good when they get into it and it's completely different. Then they feel betrayed, hurt, confused. They're like, this is not what I signed up for. We want to be clear about what we're asking them to be a part of so they can count the cost. Right? If we're asking them to be a small group, and our small group meets every single week on Wednesday, you don't tell them, hey, you can just show up once a month, it'll be cool, whatever. That's not going to be healthy for them. It's not going to be healthy for your small group. If you meet once a week, they need to know, we meet once a week. And that might seem like a lot, but it has been really great for us. We've found that it just keeps us connected and, so-and-so. You just be clear about what you're trying to do. The third thing is that we want to encourage trying it out. Now, we're balancing that with the last one. If they're not sure about it, encourage them to come and check it out. Say, okay, the first meeting we're having, we're going to invite way more people than we could actually have a part of this. And if they all stick around, then we'll figure out what to do. But encourage people to come and check it out, try it out, see how the conversation goes. So they might feel a bit of pressure when we might feel a bit of pressure when they meet at that time, that you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a trial run. I have to do this really well. But I believe God will show up. I believe God will lead us if we place that in His hands. The fourth thing on there that I have is refer. And by that I mean, if you know somebody, you invite them to be a part, and they say, well, I can't be a part because you guys meet on Tuesday mornings and I'm really only free in the evenings. If you know somebody who's like, they would be a great match for that group in the evening, refer them off to them, right? refer them over. Say, oh, well, you should be a part of so-and-so's group. They meet at this time if you know it, or I can get you more information on that. Connect them through social media, connect them through an email, connect them through a phone call, whatever that takes to refer people to it. With some of the people that we have that have been doing stuff with Rooted, they've been people who have actually been referred to us from other pastors who knew that we're like, oh, you guys are in the Whitestown area. I know so-and-so in the Whitestown area. You should meet with them. That's a great thing. I mean, same thing for small groups. We want to refer to each other. If we're going to get everybody in the church to have the opportunity to be a part of a life-giving small group, we've got to not only invite when people say no or I'm not sure, you can refer them to those. You can refer them to those who you know fit with time. If there's people who meet like in their neighborhood, like geographic location, thinking back to last week, there's things that tend to bind small groups together. Geographic location, shared interests. You feel like, oh, you love horses? I know somebody else who loves horses. You should go and meet this person. Here, I'll take you. And you connect them with that person. And then, I think I said geographic location, people being in the same place or same life stage. That's what it was. Life stage. If you're a young adult, here's other young adult leaders that we know. Connect them with, or I mean, I've seen people do this here at ZUMC for Sam's ministry, right? For the senior, hey, are you a part of the Sam's group? I'll take you over to the desk. And I've watched people walk them down to the desk. That is fantastic. We want to see that. But at different levels, do that with small groups as well. And then finally, we want to follow up with them. When we're thinking about follow-up, someone is saying yes to joining. It's good to continue to confirm that, to follow up with them. If they say yes in person, follow up with an email or give them a phone call later and just say, hey, I'm so glad that you're a part. I just want to get the information to you again so we're all on the same track. Like, this is when we're meeting. This is when we're starting. As we're moving towards the fall, and we're going to be launching small groups, starting small groups up again, ones that are kind of on break through the summer, that's going to be really important. We also want to follow up with people who say they need time to think and pray about it. You know, they're like, well, I'm not really sure right now. That's fine. That's great. We want people to pray about those things. But make sure you set a reminder, write it in your calendar, do something. Just think about, okay, when am I going to touch base with them again? Because if you're like me, who I've confessed is the person who loses his car keys, I will say, oh yeah, I'll follow up with you again. And if I don't pull out my phone or if I don't write it down, then I will think of it 2 weeks later, a week after the fact, and I'll go, I can't believe I forgot to follow up with them. We want to make sure that we check back in with them. If anybody has been referred to your group, that's another great person to refer to, right? To check back in with them, to follow up with them. Anybody who's been referred through somebody else or through, if they've signed up in the bulletin, we're still going to do that this fall. We're still going to put the small groups going on and let people, if they want to self-select into that, we're going to give them the opportunity to do that. But when we get those names, if those go to you, we want you to follow up with them. Connect with them. Just say, hey, I've got your information. We're so excited about you coming to be a part. This is going to be great. We're looking forward to it. As I kind of go through those, are there anything that you would add to that list? Or any other tips you want to share with the group?
So this is, I guess, neither of those. But I'm looking at your list of how would you feel if somebody invited you to something you really wanted to do? On the premise of something I really want to do, and so I would be excited, happy, whatever. Why is it, so I am an introvert by nature.
Yeah.
Why is it that I have this sense when I go to invite somebody to something that they're going to feel put upon, or they're going to feel like I'm forcing them to do something they don't want to do, or they're going to feel bad if they don't want to do it. So I accept that I probably would feel all of those positive things, and yet by nature I have this sense of, they're not going to want to do this. That is just kind of the initial reaction that I have that makes it hard to do that.
Yeah.
If that's a common experience or if that's just
my experience.
So that common experience of you're hesitant to ask somebody because you feel like you're, as you said, putting them out. Like you're like, putting them on the spot.
Yeah, yeah. And again, maybe that's just personality types.
Is that something that resonates with others here? I mean, Megan, you said for sure with you. Yeah.
You know, I think that's a fear, but what I found is that usually people you're asking don't get put out. As long as you give them an out, as long as you're not
Yeah.
saying you're twisting their arm, you know. But, you know, just saying.
Join my small group or else. Yeah. You give them an out.
As long as it's like, Shannon, it'd be great in our small group. Would you like to join us? And if they say, well, no, this is a bad time for me. Oh, no problem. Maybe another time. You know, so that they don't.
Yeah.
Then usually it's like, oh, thanks for thinking of me. But they don't. You know, you don't sense that they're like, oh, let me run the other direction. Cindy's coming.
Yeah. I think occasionally you can't have a time when you ask somebody and they just like, they really do react.
Yeah, they don't.
Like, oh no, why would you even think of me? Like, it's pretty rare, but it can happen time to time.
But it's still a step closer to relationship.
Yeah.
I think, you know,
It still lets people know you're not overlooked.
Right. I saw you. I thought you would, you know, be a good part of this group. And so even at the time, they may say no. I think it does open a door to building some relationship and then asking again in the future.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I know we talked 6 months ago, but
Mhm.
we're getting ready to start this up again, and I didn't know if you'd be interested this time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, and you kind of touch in there of like, no right now doesn't always mean no forever. Like, would you like to join my small group? I will never join your small group. Unless they say that. I mean, they could. I will never join your small group. Then there might be some issues, but a lot of people, yeah, then you can't ask why. A lot of people, though, it will be, it might just be a life season. Like, people who didn't come to this weren't able to be a part of this. Some of them have said, you know, I'm really busy with doing so-and-so. I'm out of town for this. Just because they said no to this training right now for this summer, it just might not work for them. So that doesn't mean I should exclude them from the rest of the things. I don't want to unintentionally do that, you know. So we've got different. Ken or Bob, which you want to go first?
I forgot what I was going to say.
So maybe Bob should go first. Bob, you go.
Yeah, as I think about what you're saying, Seth, and
Mhm.
I kind of apply it, overlay it to our church. Certainly, this church has a reputation for being a welcoming, friendly, inviting church. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think back, you know, the doors of this building were open in 2001. I would offer that in that 2003 to probably 2009 timeframe, we had a fair number of people that were coming through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
The struggle we had was that they were going out the back door.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that they were not, to your point, being referred or connected in small groups, and the follow-up was lacking. Now, so I say that I don't think we're terribly different today.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reminded of this today. I was standing in the narthex before the second service, and a couple who I haven't seen in years live in Zionsville, who were very faithful attenders of this church, and for whatever reason left the church. They didn't leave the faith, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they were in worship today in the second service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a number of people greeted them in the narthex. But my question is this: what are the systems that we have in place to follow up with that couple?
Mm-hmm.
This is a couple that is coming back,
Mm-hmm.
right, to worship.
Yep.
Up here, and that's where we've struggled in the past.
Yeah. To summarize a lot of that, as you said, it can be, at times in the past, it can be difficult where you have, if you do really great things and people come and get a part of it, but they don't get connected in, then you can lose them out the back door. You can have a great front door, but then you lose them out the back door. So you do need to have.
Now, I could call them, right?
Yeah.
And I will. I'll call them.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, given the size of this community of faith, we need
Yeah.
systems and processes in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
That don't allow people to fall through the cracks,
Yep.
right? We
And that
cannot
is-
afford doing, that happen.
Yeah.
Right?
That is
And
something that is, it's being set in place. It's already in place, but we're trying to better it. We just had a meeting this past week to talk about how do we do better at this? How do we do better at making sure we're following up with new people who come through for the first time? How do we follow up with the people who we just haven't seen in a while to make sure they're not? Systems are necessary at a church this size. You can't just rely on that. But overall, you want undergirding that a culture that connects, a culture where if you haven't seen somebody, you're like, I haven't seen you in a long time. And I just wondered, how have you been? You reach out. That is, and when I've talked to people who have left churches, that's been one of the things that's been really tough for them is they said, I left and I got a card from the pastor because they realized like, hey, I hadn't been in worship and filled out a card, or I stopped giving. But I never got a call from any of the people that I saw on Sunday. Ken, you keep getting more vivacious
That
about
was a comment I was going to make earlier is, I've been on the ad council a few times, and the bigger complaint you always get is not that I got invited and I don't want to participate in that, is that I was never asked to participate
Yes.
in anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, in our church, I've heard that lots and lots and lots of times.
Which is
And it's amazing to me, I'm an extrovert, so it's the,
yeah.
I
That's great though. Like you said, the paradox of it of we advertise everything, but if we don't invite people, then they feel left out. Heather, I don't mean to cut you off. Go right
No,
ahead.
you're fine. I just think as much as we want to invite people into relationship, we also want to invite them into purpose. And so
Yeah.
when people feel like
That's
they're
great.
being called to something that's important, that is God's work, that is designed to, create better systems in the church, for example, what you were talking about, then they're more likely to
That's a great.
say yes, right? Because we all have the same hours in a given day.
Yep.
And we all use them different ways, and some of us watch a ton of TV, some people read, some people jog, whatever it might be. So you also have to consider when you're making an ask of someone that you are asking them to probably give up something else, right? So in order to do that, I think it's important to tie them to a purpose. And like for small groups, helping them understand why are we doing this?
Mhm.
What is the purpose of a small group so that we can stay connected, we can have accountability partners, we can do life with other people who are, in the same life stage. Whatever that is for you,
Mhm.
I think will sometimes prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And I'd say for making the ask, I hear how hard it is for people to ask and then have somebody say, no, I'm not interested, or even a strong no. But just like your sermon was, we are called to go out and seek the lost sheep.
Mhm.
You were there, someone's giving you a strong answer, hearing why it's so strong or what that is. There may have been a church or a person that hurt them. We're
Mhm.
using at that moment to also be interested in them as a sheep. You are losing the moment again.
Yeah.
And so even understanding that and saying, so sorry that happened, if that ever changes, or this place is different than that experience that you had, and standing in that moment creates a better way that they know there's still a sheep that's cared for. And if you just say, oh, sorry, never wanted to be heard, you also shut the door to hearing why they don't like it. And sometimes it's legitimate criticism. If they walked out the door and nobody ever said anything, even though they hadn't been there for 20 years,
Mhm.
you go, well, gosh darn, that's not a good thing. We should be aware of that. So
Yep.
there's a place for that. So don't be afraid even with the unexpected or the negative answer, because that may be the crucible you're meant to stand in.
Yep. Heather, you had something
I
to?
would just add, don't take it personally. humans, when someone, says no to something, we
Yeah.
feel rejected and hurt and angry. And a lot of times it's not about us, so don't take it personally. If that person says no and you see them in the hallway the next Sunday, be sure to go over and say hello and good morning, how are you? Because I think sometimes when we take it personally, we begin to withdraw from those people.
Mhm.
And that is completely counterintuitive to what we're trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, to bring it back around to what Dom was saying, I'll jump over here, but I think maybe that is some of it, is that we can end up feeling some of these things ourselves when people say no. But as you said, Heather, we kind of have to be the, I don't want to say, I guess, bigger people and realize, like, the truth is they have not done these things to us. Right? They have not rejected us. They're not angry at us. They're not trying to hurt us. They're just, I'm not interested at that time. The thing that I always want to be careful of, that I've been told before and I think is really, really true, is if we don't ask people, we are answering for them. We are assuming that they are saying no, and we are giving them that answer for them. You're saying no. We don't know. We never ask them. Right? We should give them, and then we kind of end up living in that same defeat that we already were thinking about because we never even asked them. But we made that choice, not them. We need to let people make their own choices on that. Donna, you had?
The exact experience of what we're talking about this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do with it, and I've been around almost 10 years. I didn't know how to refer when we talk about refer.
Mm-hmm.
But also, when I came to, I call it Sunday school, because that's us old folks, we call it school. We are used to calling it Sunday school. I came this morning, and she was sitting there by herself, no one else. We got into a discussion about the lack of, here's my favorite word, organization,
Mm-hmm.
of a class, because we didn't know what time to come. There was no one else there. And so she and I sat and talked about it. She's been trying, and she's wanting to be involved, but she said, I don't know how to get involved in any of these things I read about.
Yeah.
And I couldn't invite her to our small group. Number one, she's younger, and ours are all 80 and older, but we're also a full group.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just I listened. That was about all.
Mm-hmm.
I feel unfinished with that.
Yeah. So it can be a struggle to if you're not sure who to refer them to, that can definitely be a struggle. That's always a hard thing when somebody's looking for something and you're like, I don't know what to do there. And I don't have a great answer for that other than we want to be prepared in the front half. We want, as we come out with different small groups, like familiarize yourself with some of the things that are going on, and try to know, like, oh, there's other things that are going on, so you can connect people with them.
But just the fact that Sunday school class is so.
And that's, I think we talked about last week, Bob had said that as small group leaders, we have the opportunity to really connect people in the church. And so one of the things that now, I think just as a result of last week's conversation that I've been thinking through is how do we keep all of you here as informed and connected as possible so that you can connect others together, not just into small groups, but if somebody is
Coordinator for that? It's a lady. I mean, we've been getting contacted by.
yeah, so Peggy does.
Peggy and I are.
Yeah.
We share the small group.
Yeah.
But Megan and Sharon and Don are.
Yep.
Are all in the-
So I'm thinking more of the what like processes, what things do we have to do
And
to
actually,
do that?
We've talked about this before as a group.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about putting together a communication piece, like a brochure or something,
Mhm.
that makes it available so that everybody, if you wanted to pick it up, like Don could pick it up and say, oh, look, here's the 25 small groups we have, here's one, and here's the name of the person that comes. That's one thing we've talked about. That gets a little tricky because not all groups are open. So you don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
There's pros and cons about how to do it.
So what would you suggest Donna do?
It's not-
I mean, what's the next step in Donna's situation? Because this is a good example.
That is a great example. Ramona asked what Donna should do for the person who's looking for, not just in theory, but in practice, where you have somebody.
Actually, I was just gonna make a suggestion, if that, there's always somebody at the greeting desk, like the Gentrys or,
Mhm.
people who, and if you let them know, they will make sure that the office can get in touch with that person and say, hey, here's some opportunity. Perry has been some of that role, and Seth, you're probably gonna be some of that role now. Just
Depending, it's kind of divided between, if somebody's referred to the office, it'll either be Perry, Bob, or myself if they kind of fit into the different groups. We've kind of had to, as we've added people, we're switching around some of those responsibilities so that people have it, but we want to.
We have the small group ministry that helps with that, but
Mhm.
that is better to kind of coordinate it through the office.
Yeah.
Is usually the best.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion. Is this a person who's been here a long time, or is she?
Not a long time, but she's been coming for a number of months.
Okay,
And she's actually looking for a church.
so my suggestion for you would be, because you're probably very well connected here, it sounds like you've been here a long time, is to connect her with another person who is well connected and aware of those things. It doesn't necessarily have to be a staff person,
No.
but if you're saying the Gentry is probably are aware of a lot of what's going on in the church, sometimes it just takes making the introduction to that person, because she may not feel comfortable walking up and meeting a new person. But if she knows that you're friends with this person, it kind of changes that dynamic. And I think asking too what she's interested in will help you kind of focus it, kind of bring it in a little bit to what, some possibilities may be.
And just to defend myself, I understand all these things. I
Of
just thought it
course.
was a perfect example.
It is a perfect example,
And
yeah.
I do intend to follow up.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, you don't have to defend yourself. I think
yeah,
that's
but it's a
a
good.
common experience.
But I don't think that it's a matter of we have to know all those answers either, right? The most thing that, if I'm looking for an answer from somebody, and if they can honestly say to me, I don't have an answer, but I'm gonna get to somebody that does, I can appreciate that more than anything.
Yeah.
As opposed to, no, I can't help you click, right?
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, we may not know, but if, like you said, Donna, you know all kinds of people, so you may be able to get connected to somebody that can provide an answer. Whether it's actually doing the introduction or just being able to say.
Instead of them thinking you're just letting them hang.
Right.
It's like
right.
the,
I think we all appreciate that because that's another step in it of being able to say, I care about you and.
you get the opportunity to make people feel this way twice,
Yeah.
in a way, in a small way, in the first part. You know what? I don't know, but I will help you.
I don't
Like,
think they're gonna feel excited.
okay, but they will feel like special, so excited. Yeah, maybe special.
We were more distressed about the Sunday school class. The door wasn't open, the chairs were still on the table. No one was there.
That's not good.
But I think that feedback for whoever's doing that is important.
That's
Sometimes
definitely important.
We can talk with one another about what things aren't going well, but if we don't share that feedback, then we don't know that we need to change things. Yeah.
Seth, the little forms we fill out or the tear-off
Mhm.
sheets, does 50% of the people fill that out? Or do new people, is there any way to know?
I don't know, but I can find out and tell you next week. Yeah, that makes me feel excited, special.
I think it's very much a lot
See,
lower.
that's what I'm afraid of, yeah.
What number? So, yeah. There are two things. One, I grew up in a small general store, and so the one thing my dad would drive him nuts is if an employee ever said, I don't know. Unless it was followed up with, but I can find out. Because he's like, you are making people feel like they're not worth your time when you tell them that. So we always want to be connecting people. Another thing that I'm reminded of was Albert Einstein. This is probably an apocryphal story. We don't know if it's true or not, but it's told that he said one time, I don't really know anything, I just know where to access the information. And they said, what do you mean? You mean you can't tell me your own phone number? And he goes over to a phone book, opens it up, Einstein, Albert, there it is right there. If you need I don't know where my phone number is, but I can take you to the place where it is. And that is a lot of it of, we don't have to be all-knowing. We just have to be able to get people connected to the right places, right information. I want to continue to move on just out so we can continue to make it through our time. But we've already started to talk about, okay, I already said that. It's our expectation that as a small group leader, you'll invite others to be a part of your small group. I want to kind of skip over the shift part and think of invitation, of when we're thinking about invitation, the number one question to ask is this person already in a small group? For inviting them to it. If the answer is no, then by all means, ask them, refer them, connect them. We want to think about this in really like fishing in different ponds, right? So there's one, we can think of fish that are inside, right? Those would be people who are already a part of Zionsville UMC. They come to worship, they're maybe involved in other stuff. Are they connected together with other Christians? Are they walking with them? If they're not, then we want to invite them to be a part, if we know that. If we're unsure, then we need to ask. I don't think anybody's going to feel bad if you ask them, hey, are you a part of a small group? Yes, I am. Oh, okay, that's great. I was going to invite you to mine if you weren't, or I was going to refer you to another one. Again, it makes people feel these ways just because you have thought of them. They're already a part of it. It doesn't apply to them, but you made them feel this way. If they're not, then again, you have that opportunity to connect them to those small groups, to go deeper. We want to kind of think through people. Who are the people that I see on a semi-frequent basis? Those are the natural place to start. If you're thinking like concentric circles of who am I around the most on a Sunday morning? Maybe you say hi to somebody every single time, but you don't really go any further than that. You kind of talk with them, you talk about some stuff that's going on in their life, but you haven't per se had them over for dinner, you haven't been a part of a small group or anything else with them, but you're just thinking, you know what, that's a person that I see every week. They sit in the pew next to me because I sit in the same place. That's a person that I should ask. I should invite them. Just see, are you a part of a small group? Are you not? Hey, I think this would be great for you. The second area that we're thinking is fishing outside. It's going beyond just this church, because the church is a community of faith. It's reaching out. It's about us gathering together, but it's also about us going out. And so we think about who are the people that we engage with that we can invite. Do we have coworkers? Do we have neighbors? Do we have people that we meet on a semi-frequent basis, and we can just ask them those things? We can, again, feel a little apprehensive about asking them because we're not sure. Well, they might say no. But you know what? No is probably the worst thing that you're going to get. Right? If that's what's so bad about that? The worst thing of them saying no. No. Well, okay. I mean, most people are not going to be offended by that. There is a small percentage of people who, well, I think faith is a private thing. You shouldn't even ask me that. But that's a really small number of people. Even though the United States is largely ceasing to be a quote-unquote Christian nation, the interesting thing is that sociologists always thought, we're going to become a hardcore atheist country. That's what's going to happen. It hasn't. People are just largely indifferent to religion. They just kind of go out and try their own thing, do their own thing. They're kind of wandering. They're not really sure where they're going. They're indifferent. When you invite them, you're not usually offending them. Now, if you invite them and you say, you need to come to my small group or you're going to burn in hell for eternity, then you might tick some people off. That would be a no. And if somebody says, is that person a part of ZUMC? I'll be like, no, not at all. Not anymore, they're not. No, just kidding. We just want to connect with those different people. And it's not cold calling, somebody we saw 5 years ago at a high school reunion. It's just, again, thinking through those people that we naturally are rubbing up against, people that we already have kind of a sphere of influence, whether we think about it or not, and and that touches other people, that connects with other people. Who are those people? We can certainly go out and reach and look more, but it's amazing because most of the time the people that come into church from outside of church, again, it's through those personal connections. It's us acting as a bridge builder, right? We act as a bridge builder between, or almost the bridge to bring people to Jesus. That's what, there's a guy named Donald McGavran who studied how churches grow. He's big in the church growth movement that was huge in the 70s through the 90s. And he called them the bridges of God, that it's those natural relationships in family, in work environments, and in neighborhoods, that we become the bridges of God to connect with people. And so, finally, we need to think about living this. I mean, we've gone through all these different things. We've given a lot of hypothetical situations. You guys have shared some awesome advice of this is a situation I encountered and just different thoughts of ways we can live this out. But thinking practically, I think as we're leading toward small groups launching this fall and really getting back into the swing of things, I want to think about 7 people that you can invite to be a part of a small group. Now, that's not per se, if you're part of a closed small group, it doesn't have to be your small group. It could just be 7 people to be a part of a small group. And that, if you think about the number of people that we'll have go through these trainings, that adds up to a decent number of people in this congregation. In this congregation, even going beyond this congregation, we want to take the opportunity to invite them. When we get together next week, one of the questions that I will ask, I'm telling you this right now, is, have you thought of 7 people? Right? Because we want to follow up. We want to come back to the application. That's part of that small group process. We come back to the things that we've talked about and reconnect with them. The easy way, I think, to do this is, it's not like, oh, I'm going to go out and make these 7 asks, because there's a lot of time between now and then, so I'm not like pressing you to do that. If you feel led by God, then go ahead. But maybe just start with praying about it. Set aside some time this week, pray about, God, who are the people that I've encountered that I need to ask to be a part of a small group? And does a name or a face come to mind? And it's amazing when I just try to take those times and clear out my mind and think about, okay, God, I'm going to ask you this question. God brings like names and faces of people that I'm normally surprised. Like, that wasn't me, because there's no way I would have thought of that person. Then I have to go and follow up on that eventually. I want to know, by next week, can we do that? Have 7 names. Other ideas for thinking about reaching out. I say that before we get to the end, because I just want to go through these next ones. They're a little different ways of thinking about reaching out to invite other people. One, you can have a bring a friend gathering. So when you're doing a small group gathering, you have one specifically about encouraging everybody who's a part of that small group to bring a friend to it. You have a topic that is very open to people who might be at a different point in their spiritual journey, and you make it very fun. You make it engaging. You make an opportunity for them to come and taste and see what it is like to be a part of your small group. Right? We want to give people opportunities to try things out. That's one of those ways that not just you inviting, but you can take it and then have other people do that. We want small group members, ultimately, not just small group leaders to invite other people, but for people who are parts of small groups to then invite other people. We want this to be a trickle down or a trickle through type thing where it affects. We change the kind of the culture of that. The second is you can do something as a group to give to others, like to give back, to serve. You could go and take part in a shared mission project. You could go up to the Shalom House and serve in Lebanon. You could volunteer on the Habitat for Humanity Faith Build. Pick something as a small group where you can share together. And you might be thinking, what does that have to do with invitation? And part of it is just about cultivating the same heart that God has for mission, the same heart that God has for people who are not there and a part of it. That tends to lead to people being more open to, okay, who are the people that we're going to include? Who are the people that we're going to reach out to? Third, you should meet regularly to pray, including prayer about those to invite. some small groups different churches will make that a part of their thing of just a simple part of a prayer, even at the end, of how, God, are we going to invite other people to come and be a part. Some groups keep a chair. If they're meeting in places and they all have chairs, they keep one chair open, symbolically saying, there's room for one more person. We need to fill this chair. And when that chair is filled, they add another chair until they run out of chairs and they split groups or do whatever they have to do. But you symbolically are saying, this group is open. It's not closed. It's there for the people who haven't heard yet, the people who aren't involved, the people who we need to walk with. Keeping that as a part of it. This fourth one, have social events where you can invite friends to join. Again, I said earlier on that for Cru, we would do this beach trip and we would invite, it gave a great opportunity for those who are involved in Cru to invite their friends to come and just do something social. Not explicitly about sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with them, but it's about showing them, one, we are not crazy. We are not those crazy people, and two, you can have fun. We want to include you. You matter to us. You matter to our group. We have that opportunity to do that. Before I move on, are there any other ideas for reaching out? Any of you have anything that you have done before that you want to share with the group?
I've just talked to other people in the same life stage.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a park one time, and a mom and I got to talking because our kids were the same age, and I invited her to our mom's group. They later joined the church. And they've moved away now, but we're still in touch.
It's awesome.
And that was all just because, we were chit-chatting while our kids were playing. So.
Mm-hmm. Connecting people, thinking, like you said, the life stage, but connecting with people first and foremost, us with them. Mm-hmm. And once we've done that, connecting them with others. That's great. Great. Oh, Sharon and Ken both have them.
I remember there are times when you say something and you don't even realize it had an impact on somebody too.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of people join the choir and they would say, you invited me to join the choir. And I would say, when did I do that? Say, a couple of years ago.
The absent-minded
I had a good
invitation.
voice and I ought to join the choir. And so that's been rolling in their brains for 2 years or something.
Percolating in there. Yeah. So you invited people and 2 years later they come. Yeah. Well, my friend, after this, we're actually going to, Chas and I are going to go to a surprise party for a friend down in Plainfield. They're church planters there. But they have people who are showing up at their worship services today who they invited literally 5 years ago when they started. And they're like, some of these people, I feel bad because we haven't invited them in a long time. But here they are. They showed up, it just took a while for that seed to really, I'm losing the words right now, come forth. But Sharon.
I was thinking, growing up as a kid, there were many places that our church met that were neutral places, like we would have a big gathering in the park.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a day of activities, and if you're in the community park, we'd be the ones doing stuff on the playground, and there'd be, fill-in softball games.
Mm-hmm.
So there were ways we integrated that you could kind of meet people in a way that was your church, but other people there too. And now everything is bounded inside the church. So it's much harder to check it out without a commitment.
Yeah.
It's very hard for a lot of things. You drive by a restaurant and circle it to figure out if you're going. You look in the windows to see what the people look like and if you're dressed right. I think there are ways, everything now occurs inside the church, and you have to make that commitment to go in without very much at all knowing what's on inside, and maybe there's other ways to do it.
Yeah.
We need to think through how do you create a neutral thing. We do the yard sale for Habitat for Humanity outside on the front yard because they bring their stuff, or we need to figure out a neutral way
Mm-hmm.
to have everybody do something.
Salem has the Chili's ice cream social.
Yeah.
But we don't have
So
one
it's-
like that, even.
so it's not-
Raise it for some new thing here, or
Mhm.
playground for, Zionsville, or improvement to the skate park or something.
Yeah. That's thinking outside. Yeah, thinking outside is just another great perspective of how do we take what we do, not always meeting here in the church building, but how do we take that out in the community where we can connect with other people? If you can, you could just as easily have a lot of Bible studies rather than here on a Sunday night or whatever. If you don't need childcare, different stuff, you could meet at a coffee shop. You know, you could take it there. It's kind of amazing. Some people be like, what are you doing? Tell me about this. What's going on? And like you said, it also gives people who, if you have invited them, it's a neutral location for them to come and be a part. Your comment about the restaurants, circling around to see what the people inside look like and if they're dressed right, explains why I show up at restaurants and always feel like I'm dressed the wrong way. I need to adopt that. I'm used to being underdressed most places I go. I'm just kind of I live with that. It's my burden to carry. But yeah, those are great ideas. I like them. Finally, as we close out, I just want to point out we have the opportunity to make big changes through invitation. Sometimes we think it's like, man, this is like the simplest thing. But sometimes simple things are incredibly powerful. And I want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to show a video from Alpha about invitation.
Albert came to faith in Jesus at a church service in a nearby town. He was so full of excitement and passion that he filled a truck with friends and took them to the next service to hear the gospel as he had. There was a farmer's teenage son who Albert was especially keen to get to the service, but the young man was hard to persuade. He was much too busy falling in and out of love with different girls, so it's safe to say that he wasn't particularly attracted to Christianity. But Albert Mamakin had an idea, and he managed to persuade the young guy to come to church by asking him to drive the truck. When they arrived, Albert's guest decided to go in, and was, in his own words, spellbound. He went back again and again, until one night he went to the front of the meeting to pray and gave his life to Jesus Christ. The year was 1934. Since that day, Albert's guest has spoken in person to over 210 million people about the Christian faith, more than anyone else in human history. He has become the friend and confidant of 10 American presidents and has spoken about Jesus to almost half the world's population by radio and TV. The man's name is Billy Graham.
Friends, sometimes when I think about just the big things that God calls us as the church to do in the world, I think I'm so vastly underprepared. Right? If this is the vision that God has given us, I do not have what it takes to do that. I can't be a Billy Graham. I can't be, somebody like that. I just don't have that in me. But God doesn't call us to be Billy Grahams. He calls us, most of us, to be Albert Mamakins. Right? We can all be an Albert Makin. We can invite somebody. Sometimes I wonder how many Billy Grahams have been passed up because we didn't invite somebody. Or how many Billy Grahams are in the making that just need to be invited. Nobody knew when that happened that he would have the opportunity to preach to all those people around the world. Nobody but God. Right? That's a pretty humbling and amazing thing. We have an opportunity through simple acts of faithfulness. They're taking simple acts of stepping out of our comfort zones, of making ourselves a little bit vulnerable to invite people to be a part of something great. It could change our lives, could change their lives, could change the world. So, with that said, I'd like to close in prayer. And again, I thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed lunch. I hope you can make it back these next weeks. If not, I'm going to send out not just the YouTube videos for the 2 sessions that we've had, but also the notes for this week as well. So if you took some, that's great, but I'll also... Oh yeah, forgot about those. So before you head out, I'll try to hand one of these out to all of you, but let's close in prayer together. God, again, we thank you for the opportunity to come together here today, to share the different perspectives, to share the questions, to share even our fears and our hesitations. Lord, we pray that at this time that you continue to just work on our hearts. Lord, we pray that you would bring to mind people who we can invite, simple ways that we can make them feel valued, can make them feel special, can make them feel seen. That they might be connected together in just relationship, that they might be a part of a relational network that undergirds this church. that when people come in, they get caught, that we would be really fishers of men as you intended for your disciples to be. We don't want to let people slip through the cracks. We don't want to lose them, Lord. We want to connect with them so that they can be faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, walking with you every day of their lives. Lord, help us to walk with you by your Spirit, that we might be more like Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.